It's the morning show on eTV on this Monday morning. It is so good to be with you. Now we're going to get into conversations relating to current affairs and things that connect to you and I in areas that we sometimes think we might be missing. Now, we saw in the past few weeks headlines being made by economic tensions sparked by South Africa in the United States. Now, following the diplomatic standoff between President Ramaphosa and US President Donald Trump, there's been a flurry of updates from a finance ministry press briefing to major reactions in our financial markets. So this morning we're picking it up where we left it off last week Friday, and joining us once again via Zoom is tax attorney Jordan Mulindi from the Latita Africa, here to help us understand what's next for South Africa's economy and more importantly how it affects you and I. Jordan, welcome back to the morning show. It's good to have you this Monday morning.
Thanks, Kosi. I'd like the opportunity. Thank you so much, man.
Jordan, maybe let's pick up on where we left things off on Friday with a brief summary in terms of some of the highlights and lowlights from Budget 3.0 that was presented about a week and a half or so ago.
I think the main highlight to take from the budget speech 3.0, is the scrapping of the VAT increase. I think that's a relief for most consumers in the country. And then definitely the mechanisms that SARS is going to take now to make up for the deficit that's going to be caused by the lack of an increase of VAT. So it's definitely the debt collection mechanisms as well as the fuel levy that's going to be a big cause for concern going forward. Yeah, and just how SARS is going to make a big impact on its debt collection mechanisms.
Now let's talk about that 20 billion rand gap that Treasury is having to try find a way to fill that gap. What are some of the ways that we can anticipate that this will happen, that shortfall, to be able to recover it as we go into the new financial year?
So the main mechanism to improve the shortfall is the debt collection. So SARS has allocated 7.5 billion roughly into its operational standards. So we should expect like a big change from SARS regarding collections. So basically businesses need to be now more aware of their tax affairs, because SARS is certainly going to pull the strings and tighten everything around that. So the main change we should anticipate to make up for the shortfall is debt collection. Now, based on the way the Treasury has forecasted how much can be collected, I do see like a good substantial amount being brought in through debt collection. It's just cause for concern to see how well it's going to be managed.
One of the things that we've also seen is the trade conversations, and I think for a lot of us who might be thinking we're not sure what exactly this looks like on the ground. Should the standoff continue, the friction that's happening between the South African government and the Trump administration, which industries in South Africa stand to lose the most? Should these continue and a better relationship not be found between the two nations?
I think we shouldn't jump and be panicked as yet. I think the bulk of trade relations between the countries is mainly predominantly with platinum metals and titanium. Now, those industries are not heavily affected by the tariffs, but the agricultural sector and the manufacturing sector, those are the two main concerns that we should be thinking about. For instance, citrus farmers, if we're talking about the impact of the tariffs, it means South African goods are now more expensive. So that'll have a chain reaction in citrus farmers and the exports of motor spare parts and just cars in general. So based on that, South African goods will now be more expensive, leading to less competition and having a trickle-down effect on our economy. But I think the cause for concern is not immediate as yet, but let's see how it transpires going forward.
Of course, we try to make sense of where the bilateral relationships are between South Africa and the United States, especially of the conversation that happened outside of the media room in that meeting between the two presidents. And I guess we kind of picked this up from certain moves from the nations. One particular move that caught a lot of South Africans' attention over the last couple of days is seeing the second group of South Africans, a second group of Afrikaners that have arrived in the United States. In this case, very different from the first group, without the attention of the media, but they've kind of arrived. I'm not too certain even of the number that has arrived in the United States. Could one be saying there's an indication of some sort on the success or the lack thereof of those bilateral relation meetings that we saw the two presidents have previously in the Oval Office?
So the main focus of those meetings was meant to be trade relationships. So I think it became a big ambush on white genocide, and that became the main focus of it. So I do commend Ramaphosa and his team for maintaining their composure. I don't think the shift of refugees from South Africa to US, I don't think that's an indication of a lack of relationship or trade breakdown. I think it's just people capitalizing on the opportunity that's been given to them, but predominantly focusing more on the trade relationships and the impact of a budget. I don't think there's a direct correlation between the two. It's just people taking opportunity, what's presented before them.
No, 100%. Well, Jordan, before you wrap up our time together, there's an ordinary South African that's listening to this conversation and thinking, man, just feels so much way above the brow for me, and I'm not too sure what this means or what are some of the things I should take note of. What do you say to ordinary South Africans of what they maybe should prepare for, how they should position themselves in their finances, and maybe they should consider when it comes to their businesses for where we find ourselves in hope to get to where we're hoping to be in these bilateral relations?
So from a South African perspective, an ordinary taxpayer, I would definitely say, look, if you're not 100% sure of what's going on with your tax affairs, hiring a professional always becomes a much cheaper venture down the line, You'd rather spend on that now than to worry about that later. Because, your professionals can give you guidance on how to fix your tax affairs. But that being said, let's see how it all transpires. I think personal finance related, you still got to do things like budgeting, staying on top of your finances. And having said that, there are some complications that will arise, with increase of, for instance, fuel and transport costs. That's going to be something not everyone can fully plan for. So that's something to still be conscious of. But then, so the base that we can do now is just being on top of your budget, hiring a professional if you're not sure how to proceed, and just staying optimistic. That attitude makes a big difference.
Jordan, thank you very much for your insights this morning, and of course, just that little bit of optimism to kickstart this Monday morning. TMS fam, that's where we're going to wrap up this conversation, where Jordan Mulindi is just joining us to help us make sense of this rapidly changing economic picture. And as we've heard, the situation is serious, but staying informed is one of the best ways to stay empowered, but also staying optimistic, to not already rush off to worrying about some of the worst case scenarios, but really believing that we'll be able to see a different future for South Africa. Taking a quick ad break, we'll be back in just a bit.